This is Patrice Wendling at the annual meeting of the American Society of Clinical Oncology, speaking with ASCO's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Richard Shilsky. We've just heard some data on the latest drug shortages in cancer patients. How is ASCO responding to this, and how are they offering guidance to physicians?
Yeah. So ASCO actually has written a white paper to offer guidance to physicians on how to make decisions about drug allocation in the face of drug shortages. It's been authored by ASCO's Ethics Committee. The paper itself is currently under peer review at the Journal of Clinical Oncology. So I can't talk about it in great detail except to say that the essence of it is that physicians and practices should put mechanisms in place prospectively to think about how to deal with allocation of drugs that are in short supply, and also to seek guidance from ethics committees or their pharmacy and therapeutics committee about what are the best strategies that they can use in their practice setting to make decisions about how to allocate drugs when they don't have sufficient drug to go around. And the issues that should be considered are whether the patient has a potentially curable illness or not, whether or not there is an evidence-based, medically appropriate substitute that can be used, whether or not a patient can safely delay a round of chemotherapy and things of that sort.
So it will not give specific guidance on what to do, let's say, in colorectal cancer?
Correct. I mean, the paper provides general guidance. It does not provide specific guidance in specific clinical settings or with respect to specific drugs, because, it would be a 200-page document if it tried to do that.
What are you finding in terms of the adverse events, and also how is this affecting practice? How are clinicians dealing with this?
Yeah. So we have only anecdotal data on things like adverse events and patient outcomes. I mean, there are anecdotes about patients having drug overdoses because of the unintended consequences of substituting one drug for another without taking into effect that it's not a milligram per milligram substitution. So in some cases, you actually have to modify the dose. You can't just swap out the drug but continue to use the same dosing strategy. And so, that's something that doctors and their nursing staff have to pay very careful attention to. There is this report out of St. Jude's Hospital last December, I think, which is really the only data we have looking at specific outcomes, showing that children with Hodgkin lymphoma treated on a national protocol when nitrogen mustard was in short supply and they had to substitute cyclophosphamide in its place. Oncologists would think that is a simple substitution. They're both alkylating agents, they have similar spectrum of activity, they're both well-established drugs, and yet the event-free survival in the children who had the cyclophosphamide substitution, all other things being equal, those children had worse outcomes than the children who were able to continue to get the standard nitrogen mustard regimen. So this is an issue we have to pay careful attention to. It's difficult to capture the outcome data, but it's something we're concerned about.
How has it affected the way physicians will even approach what regimen they might choose?
Yeah. We don't know specifically what physicians are doing, but again, what we're hearing anecdotally is that physicians are sort of adapting to this chronic and unpredictable problem of drug shortages, essentially by saying, we're just going to change our prescribing habits and we're not even going to consider using the generic drugs anymore. We're just going to make a wholesale substitution to the brand name products because we know that they are reliably available. Now, that's fine in many cases, particularly where there's a strong evidence base to support making that substitution. The problem, of course, is that by doing so, what they're substituting typically much more expensive drugs for very inexpensive drugs, and so that is contributing to increasing the cost of care. What we're also finding is that there's a lot of time that's being taken up in physician offices and medical centers and pharmacies searching for drugs, counting up the amount of drugs that are available to be sure that at any given point in time there's going to be a sufficient amount of drug available for next week's group of patients who are coming in. There's a lot of anxiety created on the part of patients who don't know from one week to the next if they're going to be able to receive their chemotherapy on schedule and at the full dose. So there's a lot of additional energy that's being spent trying to adapt to the drug shortages, which is just reducing the overall efficiency of medical practices.